Hello and welcome to Speedify Live. I'm your host, Alex Gizis. This is our 34th episode. Wow, that's crazy. Of Speedify Live, the show that talks about the many aspects and forms of live streaming, and we share people's experiences and interesting stories and lots of, information and advice on how to get better at live streaming. And today is very much about the information and technology. I am going to show you how to turn a Raspberry Pi, one of these, not just one of these, but this one in my hand, into a bonding Wi-Fi router. It will be able to take multiple internet connections, a tethered iPhone, a plugged-in Ethernet, and share them out of the Wi-Fi, so any devices that join will get this bonded internet connection that uses all of those at the same time, give you much more reliable internet. So I freshly formatted. I'm not going to show you that, but I went through using the, let's get a nice layout here. Oh, there, no. All right, there we go. Hopefully that's readable. I'll Control-Shift+, make my fonts very, very large for you. And the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the software on this thing is up to date. So you run sudo apt-update. So sudo is super user do. So it lets, turns whatever you type after that to an administrator command. And apt is the software install, uninstall program for Debian Unix. And, and the Raspberry Pi is freshly formatted, hasn't joined my Wi-Fi yet, and is not on the internet. So as you see, commands fail. So I will take an Ethernet and plug it into it. And we will try it again. You see, maybe we need to give it one more second to get its IP address and whatnot. Better. All right, so being on the internet helps with internet connectivity. Even Speedify, well, it doesn't have Speedify on. This is freshly formatted. I used the tool off raspberrypi.org to, that little SD card, reflash it with Raspberry Pi OS. And here we go. So right now the update actually pulls down the list of all the software packages that are available and what the latest version is for each one. And all right, I know what that means. Sudo apt upgrade actually upgrades all your packages. And yeah, sure, let's continue. There's standard commands when you're on Raspberry Pi. Sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade, and it pulls down the latest version of everything you might need and gets you up to date. One of the cool things you're going to see here is that when you install Speedify and the Connectify repository gets added to the list of repositories that Raspberry Pi OS knows about, which means that whenever you run these commands in the future, you're also not only updating all the new software from nice people at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, you're updating Speedify as well. So it just fits in. And there are graphical tools to the Raspberry Pi for upgrading software versions, and they just work. You just upgrade your software and you're upgraded. So we are live here, and I see some of you have started to see that. LVA12LT says, "Hi, I like Speedify on my Raspberry. It works perfectly." Good. Good. So while I'm at this, and this is running, and it'll take a minute. Let's pull up a web browser, and let's go to support.speedify.com. This is the place where all of our documentation lives. And I can do it this way. Watch this. There it is. All right. So support.speedify. Oh, it would help if I could spell my own name. Speedify.com. All right, here we go. So here's our knowledge base. And if you scroll down, it's a little sluggish while software updates going on. There's Linux, 16 articles. This is where you want to go. So we go here. Can I use Speedify on the Raspberry Pi? Getting started with Speedify on the Raspberry Pi. Wow. Here it is. Good news, folks. So we have quite a bit of documentation at support.speedify.com. Go read. Plenty of people have managed this process just fine without a video, just reading these docs. On the other hand, the other day, the president of the company, Bonnie Grover, comes into my office and she says, "Have you seen our Linux documentation?" I said, "Have I seen it? I wrote it." And she said, "Oh, you wrote it? Never mind that." And she left. So it's possible there's something imperfect about this documentation I don't know about. That's fine. Share it either in the chat or, email us at support@speedify.com. And this continues to go along. So there are going to be a couple things we're going to want to do. One, we want to install Speedify. Two, we want to use predictable network names. So this is an option in Linux where your network devices, like tethered iPhones and stuff, always get the same name every time they're plugged in. This is important with Speedify because if you say, set data caps or rate limits or priorities on your tethered iPhone, you want to make sure that every time it's plugged in, it gets the settings. The problem is it gives them terribly ugly names. But life's art. At least it'll be the same name every single time you plug it in. When we install it, Speedify is just going to show up right there in the application menu. It's going to be great. I'm going to show you how to tether an iPhone. There's only one trick to it. You need to install a little bit of software so the Raspberry Pi knows how to talk to the tethered iPhone. And then we're going to make sure that Speedify actually starts every time you boot the device. By default, Speedify doesn't start till you run it, but that's not what we want. We're turning this into an appliance where it'll plug in, start Speedify, and it'll be fantastic. So again, anyone have here we go. Our first question. Hey, Alex. AI Sports Media appreciates you showing us the magic. Good. That is what I am here for. So yeah, lots of this documentation was actually written by me. Very little of the code was actually written by me anymore. Once upon a time, there's a lot of my software here, but it's slowly being replaced by professionals. All right. It's also worth noting these instructions are basically exactly the same for any Debian-based Linux. So that's Debian, Raspberry Pi OS, Mint, or Ubuntu. So if you have a laptop running Ubuntu, which a lot of, say, developers do, you can follow these exact instructions and install this on your laptop, and you can have Speedify on your laptop. You can use your laptop as a router. I will stop at a point and say, if you're not planning to use this as a router, if you just want bonding on your, Raspberry Pi or Ubuntu laptop, this is the spot you would stop and it'll be great. All right, all done. So this is now running the absolute latest version of software. We are ready to begin. So let's actually start with the predictable network names. Okay. So the command is sudo rasb config, and this is setting options basically on the Raspberry Pi itself. And we go That was confusing. Am I back? Everyone can hear me? I am going to assume yes. All right. Why did the Raspberry Pi rebooting knock me offline? I don't know. So here's my setup. So I am running StreamYard on my PC with the camera that is filming me. It is then using Speedify to bond internet connections, and it's on Wi-Fi, and it's on a tethered iPhone. Sorry, cables aren't letting me drag it up. And that's what controls this little window with my picture on it. The Raspberry Pi, which is sitting on the desk here, is running through an HDMI capture card, which has passed through to a monitor that I'm looking at over here, which is showing me everything on the Raspberry Pi. It also has a USB out, which makes it show up as a webcam on another computer that is also, running in a browser, joined as a guest here into StreamYards. So I've got actually two computers, and they think that the Raspberry Pi's output is a webcam, thanks to this nifty $30 box I bought on Amazon. All right, so let's bring the browser back. Let's bring the terminal back. Let's bump up the font on the terminal so you guys can read it in whatever size monitors you're watching from. Go back to Speedify knowledge base. Boop, boop, boop. All right, so we just did predictable network names. So now we just follow the instructions on installing Speedify. And I want to... So I just became root. Now I paste in this command. So what is this command doing? It is using wget, which pulls files off the web, sort of like a web browser with no user interface. And so it's getting the page at getspeedify.com, feeding it through bash, which is just a shell, and really running it. So what is this going to do to my system? Well, while we wait for that, we can go look at the source. It's not that complicated. Get.speedify.com. So it does a couple things. First thing it does, what is this giant scary block? It is our public encryption key. So this key is taken and loaded into your key store, so that any files that are digitally signed by Speedify, by Connectify, your Raspberry Pi can correctly detect them as being real. They really came from us. After that, it runs apt, the same program I was using before to download the packages off our package server, just like you get them from Raspberry Pi organization when you're installing normal Linux stuff. Once you put that key in, we're normal Linux stuff, it'll download and install both Speedify and the Speedify user interface. And that's about it. All right. All right. So that is done. We now have installed Speedify on this computer, but we're not logged in. It's not running. Let's go look at it. User share Speedify is where it gets installed to. Oh. There are a couple things in here. My favorite little bit of Speedify CLI. It's actually there on Windows as well. All this stuff I'm about to show you, you can actually do on Windows as well. So, actually, I don't think we need to be root for this. So I'll just quit back out. So, user share Speedify CLI. So the Speedify CLI, it's a command line interface, lets you do anything that you can do. Well, that's interesting. I am in some sort of British keyboard layout. I did wonder when I reformatted the computer why it didn't pop up the little wizard to ask me what kind of keyboard I was using. So this is exactly the sort of thing that happens all the time when you're dealing with Linux. But that's fine. You get used to it. You have the flexibility to do whatever you want. Did getting started? Let's start the wizard. Is that just going to be a help document? Set locale. There we go. I'm not in Great Britain. I am in the United States. Set keyboard. There we go. US. All right. Wireless LAN country. It was supposed to ask me these questions after I reformatted it, as far as I know. It usually does, but this time did not. Try and get down to the United States so I can set this. All right. All right. Let's see if rebooting kicks me off this time. Shouldn't. Am I still here? I think I'm still here. All right. Love Speedify, and I hope you can get my iPhone working tethered via USB. I'll talk about the trick on Raspberry Pi is you need to install USB MUXD, USB MUXD, and I'll do that in a couple minutes. So it's sudo apt install USB MUXD, the Universal Serial Bus Multiplexing Daemon, I believe it is. And that installs whatever drivers and stuff you need for Raspberry Pi to talk to a tethered iPhone. So that is the big secret. If you've done that, it's still not working. I don't know. So do try that, Jonathan. Tell me whether or not you've done that yet. If you're not on, well, if you're on a totally different operating system, then there's totally different steps. Okay. Install USB MUXD, but I can get 1 out of every 10 times to talk to an iPhone X and iPhone 13. All right, well, we'll see. Hopefully we can figure this out. All right, Lisa says, I'm stoked that you were doing this today. I just got my first Raspberry Pi and started playing with it. All right. Yeah, so Raspberry Pis, they're kind of pitched as the $35 computer because that's what the board costs. But you end up needing power cables and a case for it. But yeah, nonetheless, under $90, you really can get a whole working computer here, plus a monitor. And all right, let's try this again. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. Speedify UI installed? All right. Yes. All right. All right. So after you install the base Speedify, you have to do what I just did there, which is install Speedify UI, the Speedify user interface. Technically, you don't need it. You can do absolutely everything with the Speedify CLI. So you can, on a terminal with no graphics or whatever, do everything you need to do. But if you do install the UI, you get, hey, Speedify. It's the same Speedify, and it really is the same code that we run on the iPhone. So I log in, put my password. Sorry, I have so many mice and keyboards on my desk right now. I keep moving the wrong ones. Yay, I'm connected. What do I do now? Use your favorite apps. So here it is. Speedify user interface running on Raspberry Pi. ETH0 is, of course, Ethernet. That's the only connection that I put in. Yeah, we can show you others. Where's this one? We can join my home network. So now in a second, this Raspberry Pi should have both ETH0 and WLAN 0. Yeah, there we are. WLAN 0, of course, is the built-in Wi-Fi in all right. Another question. All right. I just purchased a Pi 4 and Speedify a few weeks ago, and I'm very glad to see the stream. I got it working and bonding in its basic form, but I'm curious if there are more hidden router functions. There might be. One thing I want to do, I see there's some packages to, turn Raspberry Pi into a nice router with a good user interface. I want to play with them some more. I think I may do a follow-up if one of them works really nicely, of hooking Speedify to one of them. Yeah. Like what would be found in OpenWRT, or whether you advise using Pi Ethernet out and into the WAN port of a more traditional router. Yeah, if you want a full-blown router with all the features that you have in your router, right? What I'm going to show here is pretty basic. It makes a hotspot. Whatever comes into the hotspot, it puts in Speedify. Whatever comes out of Speedify, it puts out the hotspot router. So if you're looking for sophisticated graphs on how much each user used or whatever, yeah, you probably are actually better off with a router, and you can tell Speedify to share out the Ethernet, run Ethernet into the router, and then you have all the features of the router, firewalls and graphs and application filtering. And all right. Since iOS 14, USB tethering has been hit or miss on Linux. I tested Ubuntu 20.04 and Raspberry Pi OS. Once in a while it works, but most of the time it doesn't. If you need the phone Wi-Fi hotspot. Oh, call me V. That's not great. So we'll check around, see if there's more better advice. All right. So where were we? We were getting started on the Raspberry Pi, following instructions on Linux. Right. So we logged in, we connected. I didn't do it with CLI, but you can here. So going back here, user share Speedify /Speedify _CLI space disconnect. Boop. See back there in the user interface, we are now disconnected. It puts out JSON. Just connect. Boop. Testing servers, connected, and you see the output here is JSON. It shows city, New York, country. You can see which server I connected to, things like that. So this JSON, it's human readable, but the important thing is it's software readable. So if you go to GitHub, Speedify. Again, hope if I could type our own name. Ooh. You will see there's a package here. And this, gotta warn you, this actually is my code. I wrote some Python wrappers all around the Speedify CLI. So now you can write Python scripts to control Speedify, to either automate it, if you want to build your own user interface. A lot of features that have shown up recently in Speedify have started off with me writing Python scripts using the CLI to try crazy things. All the notifications that went in a couple months ago start off as a Python script of mine that was polling the CLI, and when it saw terrible things going on with your streams, I used some Python API to pop up the notifications I really wanted. And once I was sure they were right, I shared them with the developers, and they looked at what I did, didn't use one line of code, but added that feature. All right. Right. So Colt says, Brett, I run my Raspberry Pi to a GLI iNet OpenWRT router in my camper van. One reason is the router has much more powerful Wi-Fi broadcast than the Wi-Fi chip in the Raspberry Pi does. Yes. So the Raspberry Pi has a Wi-Fi chip, but it's got this itty-bitty antenna. Good for them. They got one of these tiny chip-sized antennas that works. But it's a tiny chip-sized antenna. It doesn't have a real antenna. So you can also plug in USB. You can get all kinds of USB Wi-Fi cards to plug in to give it a much more powerful Wi-Fi. Or you can do what Colt does and just get a real Wi-Fi router with those giant antennas sticking out. Have the Pi do the bonding, share out the Ethernet into the WLAN port on the router. All right. So that was a little side thing. The Python, there's a bunch of sample code here if you want to play with it. Yeah. Okay. So I showed you can use CLI to connect, disconnect. Actually, here, I'll run it without any arguments, so you get the usage to get a sense of how many things are in here, right? So, and the answer is everything you can do in the CLI, right? Show the adapters, right? And so it gives me all this information about every internet connection that's available, right? Show servers will show me every server I'm allowed to connect to. And we have hundreds and hundreds and growing. Maybe even thousands, I don't know. Keeps growing. Sadly for my hosting bill. So automatic start. Here we go. To set Speedify automatically, you do Speedify CLI. Startup connect on. Okay. So that makes sure that every time Speedify starts, it goes ahead and connects. And all right. If you want the user interface to run every time, you can run this command. I don't want that. If I want the user interface, I'll run it. Stop the Speedify service. We don't need to do that. It's clearly running. Everything's good. And then if for some reason you can't use that script, there are manual steps to download all the bits. So we got through that. All right, we got predictable network names. We did that. We now have Speedify in the application menu, as you guys saw. The built-in adapters, E0, WLAN 0, you saw both those. All right, iPhone support. Sudo apt. I'm here, and this does not work quite as well as it used to. And I assume you guys are all correct about that. And I will have to go back and do a little research here. Same here. Sometimes it works, but after a few minutes it gets grayed out and has the status not working. Is that back to the phone? Not quite sure what Jonathan's saying stops working. All right, so I now have USB MUX-D. I have an iPhone. I have a tangle of cables. My desktop system of organization got a little exceeded with this video. All right, let's try it. Boop. Ah, yes. Yes, Jonathan did mean the iPhone USB tethering. Trust this computer. Yes, trust it. Put in my code. There's a server screen. Done. For me, it worked. So you see, here's the predictable name. You can see it's hit ENXFA. This is what I was talking about, ugly names. But it will always be the same. So it didn't recognize it's a cellular connection. So it's marked as primary, right? So core of Speedify settings, the most important one is this priority. Each adapter has a priority. Primary means it's cheap, use it all the time. I mean, if you think it would help performance. Next step down is secondary. And this is usually where you want cellular connections, which says use it if it would help with a noticeable speed boost. But you know, if the primary connections are fast enough, don't bother using it, please. Backup means it's a little more expensive. You know, only use it if you need it to keep us online. And then finally, never means just don't use it. Sometimes, you know, well, you get into Linux, there are people doing strange things with virtual machines and things, and sometimes there are things that look like internet connections and aren't. Or perhaps it's a satellite dish and the cost is so unbelievably expensive, you don't want us to use it. All right. On the Raspberry Pi, if you have it sharing the connection via Wi-Fi or Ethernet, can you set clients to bypass Speedify for Netflix, Hulu, etc.? Yes. Yes, you can. I'll just show you this real quick. It does it by domain name. And we have lists built into the software. So if you scroll down to bypass, in fact, a bunch of them are on by default. So we have a list of domain names that Netflix uses. And if we see a client trying to contact them by default, we just send it out the main internet connection and let it go around us. You know, if you want Netflix to go through Speedify, just flip it off, and now all their traffic will go through Speedify through the tunnel. Netflix is a funny one because they used to block VPNs, and now they don't. But if you're going through a VPN, they only show you the movies and shows that they have the rights to show everywhere in the world. So the content gets smaller, but it all works fine. All right. Suhail says best ever VPN in the world. Really is fast and so easy. Thanks a lot. No problem. All right, so I get it working like that, and he's talking about what I'm seeing here with the not with the movies, but with the iPhone. But it usually says E3, but after 30 seconds, it just grays out on the UI. Then clicking on it when changing priority, it just says not working. All right, so the E3 is what it would call it if you hadn't turned on the predictable names. All right, I may just have to. Well, I'll continue watching for it. Obviously, Call Me V is seeing similar things to you. See if there are new versions and stuff. All right. Emma Homan, awesome. Can you do this from the CLI? Sure you can. You can do everything from the CLI. There we go. Let's just run it. Get that usage message again. Streaming bypass. So in fact, you can do a little bit more from the CLI. If you have a list of domain names, you can put individual domains to be bypassed. So, yes. All right. Thank you, Lisa. I think it's cool too. All right. Is there error logs for not working status on Speedify? Yes, we generate lots of logs. My general answer is, and send them to support, and we'll tell you what they say. We probably need more documentation on how to read the logs, but there are logs for From the user interface, you can grab a zip of all of them, actually. Down at the bottom, generate logs. This will make you, actually, I think might be a tar.gz, not a zip if you make it on Linux, but on every other platform, it's a zip file. It'll grab all the logs, put them together into one file. All right, amazing. Thank you. Used your service on a cross-country trip, and it was amazing. Excited to give it a go more permanently at a remote property. Good. All right. Suhail says, you know, my dear, I'm using Speedify from 3 years and never got any issue from Speedify. Good. I think that's good. So that's in a good way. All right. So it looks like the iPhone's working for me. And I don't know if it's related to predictable or if I'm just getting lucky. Yeah, I think we just dropped in all the comment fields. If you have questions, support at speedify.com. I think we have really good support staff. If they can't answer it, they'll go get the real developers. Another trick here in the document, I think I'm not going to show today. You can configure, so you power the Raspberry Pi through its USB-C charging port, right? But that port is actually a live USB port. You can tell only on that port, not on any of the other USB ports. You can tell it to act like an Ethernet card on that port. So if you plug it into a computer, it'll show up and claim to be a USB Ethernet card. You want to do this through a powered hub because it pulls a lot of power. And I think I had a port overheat once on my laptop trying to do this, but now I have a powered USB hub where the power cord, the USB power from my laptop goes into this hub, and then from there it goes into my PC. So it has enough power. So then you can turn this thing instead of a router into a USB Ethernet card. You plug into a computer, and whatever goes in and out of that Ethernet port is actually going in and out of Speedify. So you can have this weird bonding card. It's a fun trick. All right. All right. I also have predictable names activated, but still no luck with the iPhone. But maybe I have to do a fresh install on the Pi. Maybe, Jonathan. It sounds like there's enough people having trouble. All right. By the way, why we will be asking Speedify, and it's so easy. So I'm not quite sure you're. So that's a question I don't understand. If you're just saying it's easy, thank you. We try very hard to make it easy. So the problem with the Raspberry Pi, there is one real problem with the Raspberry Pi from my point of view. It does not have AES hardware acceleration, which means it is slow at encryption. So about the most you can push through this thing is like 400 megabits. Now, so for some people are putting together 3 2-megabit internet connections. And in that case, what I just said means nothing to you. The Raspberry Pi is 70 times faster than what you need. Don't worry about it. It's really useful. But if you're really dealing with trying to put together 200 megabit internet connections, the Raspberry Pi is going to get warm and unhappy, and it'll barely keep up. Oh, all right. Another question from Lisa. Will the USB-C Connect create a faster, more reliable connection to the laptop? Actually, and I'm not sure about this, I think it might be USB 2, which means it's capped at like 300 megabits. Again, these speeds, it's hard to know who's going to say, oh, that's terrible, and that's not fast enough, and who's going to say, my gosh, I would love to have 300 megabits. So I think it shows up as a gigabit Ethernet card on a USB 2 bus, which means, 480 megabits is the fastest line rate, but by the time you put packet headers and stuff on it, 312 is the kind of speeds I see. What about a mini PC instead of messing with the Raspberry Pi? Yes, if you put Debian or Ubuntu on a mini PC, all these same steps work exactly the same way. And the mini PC is probably 10 times faster at most things than the Raspberry Pi. They all have AES hardware encryption. There'll be, no limits on CPU, right? If you have 1,000 megabits, they'll be able to do 1,000 megabits. All right. What's the best Pi OS to run Speedify on? I've been using it mostly on Raspberry Pi OS, the 32-bit version. I suspect I know there's a 64-bit beta floating around. I haven't tried it. I did try it on the 64-bit Ubuntu build for the Raspberry Pi, and that worked fine too. The getspeedify.com, that script, it figures out. We've got 32 and 64-bit versions for ARM. We have 64-bit versions for Intel style, PCs. So it'll just figure out the right version and install it for you. All right. Maybe some people, they now want to have Speedify. I'm everywhere and all my friends to have Speedify. Good. By the way, everybody, tell your friends about Speedify. Not enough people know about this software. Seems like people who have it love it. Also, while I'm at it, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're watching us on. I guess most of you are. Gotta be careful about putting my forearm down on keyboards. All kinds of things pop up. So follow us or subscribe, right? YouTube and subscribe. Can't keep track. All right. So we got the instructions starting the UI automatically. Startup connect. We did that. All right. So this is, if you don't want to be a router, this is where you stop. This is a Raspberry Pi or your Ubuntu laptop fully set up to use Speedify to get bonded internet. But let's say I want to turn to a router. So how can I share my Speedify connection on Linux via Wi-Fi? There's also instructions for Ethernet. But I'll do the Wi-Fi version. It's about one word difference between the two. All right. Before I do this, sudo apt install Emacs. Because like all good people, I use Emacs to edit my text files. And yes. So that's running. All right. So Speedify on Linux comes with a bunch of scripts to set up the hosting. All right. So 1993, I had a job as a computer programmer. Me and one other person, we were sharing a Sun OS workstation. Operating system doesn't even exist anymore. He gets so mad at me. He's like, your Emacs, it's using a whole meg of memory. He's like, there's no reason for a text editor to use a whole meg of memory. I don't know. What he would have said about the Chrome browser, I don't know. 100 megs per tab. All right, but we're almost there. It's installing Emacs. All right. So the installing scripts, though, are installed automatically. Look at the instructions real quick. In etc Speedify, there's a speedify.conf file. You have to be an administrator to edit it. So sudo emacs etc speedify.conf. Boop. Here's Emacs. And there are a couple things you need to do. Enable share. 1. Okay, if it's 0, we stop and don't do any sharing. But if it's a 1, we try to turn you into some sort of router. All right, so the sharing interface, WLAN 0. That is the name of the Wi-Fi card on my device. You can see it here in Speedify. So I do that. If you want to mess around with IP addresses and things, I'm just going to use the defaults. That's fine. So here we go. Wi-Fi interface, WLAN 0. Oops. I just fat fingered something. Right back there. All right. Wi-Fi SSID. Sure. Speedify AP. Wi-Fi password. We need something more secure than password. That would be terrible. That would be so unsecure. All right. Now we have a nice secure password. Password 123. All right. There we go. We can do 2.4 gigahertz, or we can do 5. I'll do 5 because it's generally better. A little shorter ranged, but I'll let it automatically pick the channel. I don't think I need to do that. And Wi-Fi country, US, because I'm in the US. If you're in a different country, you should put in your country so that you follow the laws in your country. There's a table in Raspberry Pi OS of which channels can be used by which country. Not that much variation, but there is some. All right. So with all of that done, now I can type sudo service Speedify sharing restart. Okay. Pokes us, tells us to reread the configuration file around sharing internet. Taking a moment. Let's see what else you guys have going on here. Speedify Official points out we have a holiday sale going on. Cyber Week 2021. Yeah, you don't need the coupon. You just go to the website. Your first year is 40% off. So that is great. All right. Well, thank you, Sahel. We appreciate your support. Why is this taking a while? I don't know. I'm doing lots of important things, I'm sure. Oop. I wonder if I see the hotspot yet or if it's still on its way. That's not great. Let's just try it again as a starting point. No. I'm going to stop it. Now I'm going to start it. Called it Speedify AP, right? I don't see it yet. All right. All right. So for those who keep joining, we are live. So if you have questions, all right. Thank you, Sahel. We appreciate it. All right, started. Of course, you got. Ooh, can you guys see my iPhone? Speedify AP has appeared. So I click it, and forget this network. I guess I keep using the same name and giving it different passwords. So that confuses iOS. And oh, so back in Speedify, let me show you something. WLAN 0 is now disabled because I'm sharing over it as a hotspot. It knows it can't try to pull internet from this to get a loop. So whichever connection, if you're using an Ethernet, it won't be able to use that anymore. But of course, you can have multiple of these, right? I can get, it's got 4 USB ports, 5 if you include the built-in C one. So you can plug in a USB Wi-Fi, a USB Ethernet. You can plug in a hub. Another trick for the truly advanced, you can plug the Ethernet into a smart switch. And then use VLANs and have your one Ethernet card pretend to be a dozen or more different Ethernet cards for all the ports coming out of your Ethernet switch. So I know there are people who are doing that, who have, a little PC, mini PC, an Ethernet switch, and then lots and lots of Ethernet LTE cards actually plugged into them. And that's a way to very reliably get eight different internet connections, 12 different internet connections. The software supports up to 31 internet connections at a time. There are people who have actually done 12 internet connections at a time. That's probably the practical limit, because even if the software can handle all of that, you just start running out of places to get internet connections, right? If you have 12 cell phones all connecting to the same tower at the same time, you're not going to get 12 times the speed of one, because they're going to start interfering with each other. They're going to max out the internet connection to the tower. They're going to, use up the bandwidth that carrier has. So there's some practical limits. I think there really are people who are using 12 internet connections with Speedify, but that seems like the real limit. Or where was I? All right. All right. What else? Anyone else have any questions? That we got the Wi-Fi sharing managed to turn into a router. Look at my notes, see if there's anything else I intended to say during this. Oh boy, we're at 5:58. That turned out to be 1 hour. So maybe that's just a good demo, and we end it there. So last call for comments, questions. Sport.speedify.com. All this documentation is up there, and it walks you through everything. All these steps are exactly the same on Ubuntu. Installing is completely different on Windows, but the user interface, the CLI is the same. The Python API even is the same, right? You can write one script that does stuff to Speedify and have it work on both Linux and Windows. So that is kind of cool. Yeah. Obviously, iOS, same user interface, no way to jam in a command line interface that you could access. So that's kind of a problem. All right. I think we are out of questions. Thank you to all of you. I think this was successful enough. There are enough people jumping in that I feel like this was valuable. So I will do this again. Post suggestions. Obviously, there's do it on Ubuntu. All right. Oh, yeah. I can do it, on some mini PC. If you want to see that, I can mess around with the USB-C and show it as an Ethernet gadget that you plug into things. I could even show how to use Python API if anyone was excited about that. So, all right. You are welcome for the help, Colt. And we'll look into it. We'll spend some more time playing with tethered iPhones and see if we can put together a pattern, or if there's certain versions of software that work better than others. All right. Got a request for the mini PC build. I think we will do that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, FYI, there's no kill switch on Ubuntu. If you can implement it, please. I know it's on Windows, not Ubuntu. Yeah, that is doable. We'll put that on the list. So the kill switch, just those who don't know, it's a feature where if you turn it on, then if Speedify doesn't work, it purposely blocks all of your other apps from being able to access the internet. Which, depending on your point of view, is fantastic or insane, right? So if you want to make sure that all of your traffic is protected by Speedify's encryption, then the kill switch makes sense. That if for some reason, if Speedify isn't working, Speedify can't get connected, then there's no internet. Other people are just using Speedify to get a little bit of a performance boost. And in that case, they'd say, well, if Speedify is not working, I'll take whatever internet there is. So it's an option, and it's missing on Linux. So let me check in with people and figure out what we can do about getting that implemented for you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.